Welcome everyone to Design Thinking for School Administrators. Glad to see you here. As Sarah mentioned, we know 3:30 in the afternoon. It's maybe not the greatest hour to do this. We're trying to test out, the best times to hold webinars and that folks can make it. So in the spirit of design thinking, this is kind of a test drive for us. We're prototyping actually today. So thank you all for being here. I'm Aaron Altimus. I'm a program director with the Consortium for Public Ed, and I am joined here by my two colleagues, Sarah Brooks and Debbie Pixton. And we'll talk a little bit about our background here. So we are all program directors with the Consortium for Public Education. We are a 35-year nonprofit. We're celebrating our 35th anniversary this year, but we're a nonprofit based out in McKeesport, Pennsylvania, here in Western PA, for those of you who are joining us from across state, so just outside of Pittsburgh. And our focus is on future readiness for students. And we always frame that within 3 questions. Who am I? Who do I want to be? And how do I get there? So all the programming we do, whether it's design thinking or project-based learning or service-based learning, mentoring, you name it, it's all based on helping students at all ages and all grades answer those 3 questions. That's what all of our work does. So, and design thinking fits into all of that. So in terms of human-centered design and design thinking, Debbie, Sarah, and I are practitioners, certified facilitators, and teachers of human-centered design through the Luma Institute, which is a design firm here based in Pittsburgh that works with a lot of multinational corporations. Usually when Sarah and I went through our training at Luma, we were there with folks from Nike and Gulf Oil. So it's strange to be there representing, a 13-person nonprofit. But we were very lucky. The Luma Institute a couple of years ago was really interested in partnership with the Grable Foundation. They were interested in bringing design thinking more into the education space, in the K-12 space. So we got to learn a ton about HCD. And then we were able to take our training out to 21 school districts across our region and help schools learn the methods, understand what design thinking is, and use it in their school districts to take on some actual challenges they're facing. And Sarah will actually talk about some of those applications later in the webinar this afternoon. We've also done some one-off work in terms of human-centered design in school districts, working with schools on needs assessments for project-based learning, how to take PBL from kind of the starting place to a broader school-based approach. We also worked with a school district in terms of district realignment, thinking about what buildings and what resources are used in the district, and working with stakeholders across all of these buildings, community members, parents, you name it, board members, to figure out where they could best channel all of their resources in their district. And then multiple workshops with districts on how to engage stakeholders and strengthen their communication. And I think we actually saw someone in the chat talk a little bit about that. They're interested in HCD, and design thinking plays right into that, figuring out how to work with your stakeholders in a way that's really meaningful. So before we get started, I know it's late in the afternoon. It's good to take the temperature for folks. So I don't know if you can see it on the small screen, but I love music. My record collection here behind me, but how are you feeling today? So if you could pick a theme song for today, right now, 3:38 in the afternoon, what would your theme song be right now? What would it be? Sarah says staying alive. Nice. That was fast. Wow. Yeah, if you wouldn't mind, put it in the chat, just give us a little idea. How's everybody doing this afternoon? Where are you at? It's 5 o'clock somewhere. That's awesome. It's true. We're getting there, folks. We're getting there. Stand by me.
Crazy Train. Yes.
I am a survivor. Yeah. Have a cup of tea. I don't know that one, Gary. That's interesting.
It is an excellent time for tea.
Have a cup of tea. Huh.
Well done, Debbie. Wrecking Ball.
Woo! Oh wait, which one? There's a good Bruce Springsteen. There's
Miley Cyrus.
Miley Cyrus, yeah. Reasons by Earth, Wind, and Fire. Oh yeah. I guess mine should be Black Coffee. It's a really old classic. It's like an old standard, I guess, but that's where I'm at. Good. All right. All right. Well, thank you for putting that in the chat. So the goals for today, over the next 50 minutes, right? The first thing is to define design thinking. Some folks are coming in just wondering, what is this? How does it work? How does this fit into my school system? And we'll talk a little bit about the design basics. We're also going to talk specifically about how design thinking can support your role in your system. And the three of us are going to highlight a few methods. There are many, but we're going to highlight a few. So you can walk away today. If you're looking for a few places to start, you're going to have those. So we'll talk about a few methods. We have some short videos that you can check out on your own time to explain some of these in more detail, but we're going to cover a few quick ones that you can put into your toolbox. And then at the very end, we're going to talk just briefly, if you really like design thinking, want to learn more, we'll talk a little bit about our training opportunities and things that you can learn if you want to dig a lot deeper into this, because it's a whole world. It's a whole universe you can get into. It's really fun. I love it. But there's a lot you can do. So we'll talk about that a bit. So the design thinking basics. Design thinking is a mindset. It is. It's a way that you look at your world, right? And it's also a human-centered, it can be a human-centered approach to innovation. You know, we all work with people. If you want to get things done, you got to understand the people you work with and what they want and what they need, right? And that's where design thinking comes into play. And the more you do it, the better you'll be able to recognize where and when to apply different strategies in your work in your school district. And these quotes actually come from IDEO. They're one of the biggest, if you're not familiar, they're probably one of the biggest design firms in the world. They have some great resources out there. We'll show you at the end. If you want to dig in more to just the world of design, IDEO is a great place to start. So in terms of basics, we talk about design thinking as a cycle, and it goes in 5 parts. The first piece is empathizing. So understanding your users, your customers, your students, your employees, understanding their motivations, what they need, right? They're all your stakeholders, your families, parents. So understanding where they're coming from, understanding their experience, challenges they face, things they need. Second piece is defining. So understanding, once you understand who you're working with, being able to define and synthesize data and understand what the challenges really are clearly, right? Know your problem well. And then third part, you can ideate. It means you're brainstorming, come up with lots of different ideas, figuring out a bunch of different solutions that you could use to potentially solve the problems you're facing. And then you prototype, test things out, come up with drafts, you know, do a pilot, see what works, see where the mistakes are, go back, fix things, refine. And you test those ideas out, right? You get feedback from your stakeholders. That's the last piece. Well, I shouldn't say last. It's the last part in the cycle before you start over, right? So you get that feedback from your stakeholders, you figure out what's working for folks, and you refine it again. You listen, you learn, and you go back through and you keep refining. This is how we polish ideas into better and better ideas, right? You know, there's a whole world out there where we think that people just come up with genius ideas and it's right from the start, but really it's this cycle over and over again, years and years of ideas getting better and better. But that's the design cycle. Now, when you're doing design, you go through this pattern of kind of what we call divergent thinking. So coming up, gathering lots of information, and then convergent, which is narrowing things down. So in this cycle, you might gather a lot of information first, and then you define your problem. You narrow it down, you synthesize things, you pinpoint that real problem you have. Then you brainstorm a bunch of ideas, right? You don't want to just have one, because if your one idea doesn't work, then what? So come up with a lot. You determine your best possible solutions. You work together, figure out which ones you want to go forward with. And then you come up with a couple of different concepts. You know, test out a few, right? And then when you get your feedback, you find the one that might be the best fit, and you go with that. So it's always this process, divergent, convergent, over and over again, gathering and narrowing down. And I know Sarah's watching me on here. This is like my favorite thing to do. This is how we signal divergent and convergent, right? But it's what we do. It's like our little dance. But that's the pattern you follow in the design process. Back and forth, back and forth. And you start over. So human-centered design is a form of design thinking. Not all design is based on humans. You know, when I'm outside figuring out my garden, I'm focused on my plants. I want my tomato plants to grow, right? It's not human-centered design, but I'm still designing. I figure out where the sun's going to land and I water them and everything, and I test things out. But human-centered design is a form of design thinking that focuses on empathy, focuses on creative problem solving, focuses on humans. It's a process of developing solutions in service of people. It's built on the premise that if you know your customers well, the goods, the services, the education that you provide is going to be better aligned to meet them where they're at, right? And so just a short video to kind of get to the nature of this. I'm sure more of you have already seen Apollo 13, but there's like a 1-minute clip that I think really drives this point home.
We have a situation brewing with the carbon dioxide.
We have a CO2 filter problem on the limb module,
5 filters on the limb.
which are meant for 2 guys for a day and a half. So I told the doctor,
They're already up to 8 on the pages. Anything over 15, you get impaired judgment, blackouts, the beginnings of brain asphyxia.
what about the scrubbers in the command module? They take square cartridges.
The ones on the limb are round.
Tell me this isn't a government operation.
It just isn't a contingency we can remotely looked at.
Those CO2 levels are going to be getting toxic.
Well, I suggest you gentlemen invent a way to put a square peg in a round hole.
Okay, people, listen up. You go upstairs, handed us this one, and we gotta come through. We gotta find a way to make this fit into the hole for this, using nothing but that. Let's get it organized.
Okay, let's build a filter.
Yes, it's common.
CO2 gas is literally poisoning the astronauts with every breath. In and out.
Heads up, heads up. Heads up, people.
What's this?
That's what they got to make.
Well, you got the procedures for me right here.
That's it.
So in this analogy, you all are Ed Harris. You know, you're the administrators in the building. That's you all, right? How do I put this square peg into a round hole every day, right? You got to deal with what you got. You're as Zaretta Hammond said, you know, you're Apollo 13ing it every day, right? You got to work with what you got and serve the people you're working with. And sometimes you're dealing with a lot of crises, you know, but you're already all working on human-centered problems, right? So just to draw that home, you know, this is from a survey back in 2018, just to so you know, but you know, top challenges faced by principals, you know, by administrators, trying to find that work-life balance, managing and working with a lot of different folks in your system, meeting students' mental health needs, retaining teachers, communicating with everyone, and not to mention now currently managing schools during a global pandemic. You have a lot on your plates as administrators, right? And all of these things are human-centered problems. These are human-centered challenges, right? You got to work with a lot of folks and figure out what they need and get it to them with the resources you have. And you got to be creative in your problem solving. You got to collaborate. All human-centered. And so today we're going to talk through a couple tips. You know, we can't cover everything. We're going to talk through a few things to keep in mind. Even if you walk away just from this webinar and want to be more human-centered, you want to use more design thinking in your system, these are a few things we're going to talk about. So know and empathize with your stakeholders, understand and really make sure you can define the problems you're dealing with. Seek out inspiration when you're trying to problem solve. Don't have to start from scratch, right? Create a safe space for brainstorming when you're working with your staff or you're working with community members. inviting folks into the creative process. Build consensus, and don't be afraid to ask for feedback. Okay, so we're going to talk about a couple of different methods that fit in all these different pieces. All right, so I'm going to hand this off now to Sarah.
Hi, everyone. All right, so as Aaron said, it's really important to know who your stakeholders are. And your stakeholders are typically those folks that once you say, we're going to do this new initiative, they look at you and go, nobody asked me. I got an opinion. So who your stakeholders are those folks that are going to have opinions, and inevitably we always seem to miss a stakeholder. So it is important to be very thoughtful about who your stakeholders are in your system that you are working within. So in order to do that, you visualize who is involved in your system or your community. This could be by department, this could be school-wide, this could be district-wide. It helps to determine the individuals who should be involved when addressing a given challenge. And if we don't do this, then we're going to make assumptions or potentially ignore valuable input. And then now we're solving a problem with incomplete or biased information, which inevitably leads to people just not doing what you would like them to do. So trying to be thoughtful about who your stakeholders are is the very first step in trying to solve your problem ultimately. So with that, we wanted to ask, how do you currently get to know your stakeholders, whether it's in your school or in your district? Because this could be a really great place for folks to share how they start to engage and build relationships with all of their different folks. Thanks, Gary. Absolutely. Getting out into the community is super important, right? Visiting classrooms, right? Like regularly too, not just a stop in once a year, but like, let's see what's happening in this class pretty regularly. It's a busy job you all have. Anyone else? Parent teacher, yes. Organizational meetings. Social media does say a lot about who's in your community, absolutely. Engaging with partners, sure. Who are those folks outside of your school district that your school district works with? Thank you, everyone. Thank you. So in terms of identifying who your stakeholders are, there is a method called stakeholder mapping. And really, all it does is really just help you brainstorm who your stakeholders are. And as a team, you can identify those folks. It sometimes helps to be able to group them and to identify groups of folks. But it is also dependent on the level of who your community is. Again, it can be pretty small. It could be grade level. That's your community, right? Those folks that work within this grade level. Or it could be district wide. But we have, as Aaron had said, there's a bunch of different videos that we have linked here. So you'll see these little screenshots of our different videos that you can engage with actually when we're done with our little presentation. So identifying who your stakeholders are, extremely important. The next step is to really, in order to avoid assumptions being made, is to go and see and to empathize with the folks that are dealing with the challenge day to day. The go and see idea really comes down to the Toyota Industries uses this, and they've been using this for years. And their idea is that we're not going to go to the board of Toyota Industries. We're actually going to go and talk to the people that work on the floor who are making the cars, because they're the ones that are going to be able to tell us exactly where the problems lie. And it's the same idea, right? If you want to avoid assumptions, you want to have informed information, you go and see and you empathize with that person who is having that current challenge in order to try and solve that challenge. So one of the ways that you can do this, which you all do this every year, is observations. So observations are a common form of ethnographic research. And really all ethnographic research means is it's just a way to study how to study the way people live their lives, right? How we all engage with each other, different communities. And it's really the proverbial fly on the wall approach, and in order to build empathy and to gain understanding, like real clear understanding, not understanding that that is influenced by biases and incomplete information. So it provides a snapshot of others' experiences and actions. So when you perform observations on your students, you are doing a form of HCD already without even knowing it. However, the problems with observations and observations in general is that, you know, your timing might be kind of dependent on particular things that are going on, the context for which, you know, things are happening, the influence of you being in a classroom. That's going to definitely change how, you know, maybe the day-to-day workings of a class might work, as well as, you know, personal biases. And so these are all things that we have to be able to identify when we are doing observations in general, not just specifically for classrooms. All right, I'm going to hand it over to Debbie so she can talk about interviewing.
Hi, everyone, and thanks, Sarah, for passing it off. So interviewing is another strategy I'm sure most of you are familiar with. You have done job interviews with folks in your district, in your building in the past, but interviewing can also be a really great human-centered design method that goes really beyond that job interview situation, where you're talking with folks to really understand from their perspective what their beliefs are, what their values are, what's their experience beyond what you can see through an observation. It is also a way to really not only build empathy with people, but it helps them feel heard so that they are more likely to give you buy-in when you come back to them with a different situation that you need. There are lots of different types of interviewing. Something like appreciative inquiry is a type of interviewing where you're looking to see and understand what's good about a certain situation or an experience that someone had. Just a few tricks and tips for interviewing. We really find these 3 phrases to be beneficial, and we call them the magic phrases. The first one is, and these are all meant to be follow-up questions. So you're talking with someone about something and you really feel like you need to have more information. Asking them why, or can you tell me more about that, really pulls that out from them. Often gets you an example of the situation, which can be really helpful in understanding what's going on. If you had a magic wand or in a perfect world are great phrases to use when you're trying to help people think of something from a different perspective, and also to create that ideal situation. This also helps you in places where you're like, well, you know, I'm having trouble with parent engagement. Well, if parent engagement was great in my district, what would that look like? In a perfect world, what would parent engagement look like in your district? And then tell me a story about that. Again, provides a lot of clarity and specifics about a certain situation. So if someone comes to you with a challenge or a problem that they're not sure how to handle, hearing the full story can help you better understand and then better apply other principles to really solve situations, address challenges in your district or your building. We do, as Sarah mentioned, have all kinds of videos. We have one on interviewing where we go into much more depth about interviewing, including things like really listening to the person that you're talking to, because people know when you're paying attention and when you aren't. So with that, I will pass it back to Aaron to talk about our next method.
Yeah. So the next piece of advice, and I know I'm putting this up on the screen, you're going to think, Aaron, this is obvious, but understand the problem. And this is something I speak from experience of not fully understanding problems. I spent a good number of years running 21st century after school programs here in a couple of schools in Western PA. And there were times when I thought I really had a handle on, I made some assumptions, right? I did not go and see, as Sarah was saying, and I made assumptions and I can't try to come up with solutions to problems I did not understand. And so, as we like to say, a problem well stated is half solved. If you really understand the challenge you're facing, you're already on your way. All right. And we like to frame this using this matrix where we talk about reflecting on where you stand in terms of the design process. So do you know your problem? Do you know your solution? Where are you? Right. So, I want to tell you, there's nothing wrong with being here. Right. Actually, I think one of the greatest things we can do as professionals is often admit that we're here, that I don't know what my problem is. I don't know the solution. And I just need to go talk to people and ask questions, probably a lot of questions, do some research, and slowly build my understanding of what is going on and where the challenges lie. I know as professionals, sometimes we have this pressure to assert that we know, we definitely know, I get the problem, but like sometimes you got to pump the brakes and really step back. And I think that's hard sometimes, but admitting this can be one of the greatest things you can do. It's what I've learned personally, because, we all want to be here. We all want to know our problem and nail our solution, and things are cooking and things are going really well. That's great. But often, and like I said, I've done this, if you don't really understand your problem and you assume you have the solution, this is where you run into issues. That's what we call the danger zone. And as administrators, can't stress enough to be mindful of this. If you're working with incomplete data, or there are certain trends that you follow, or you're using a certain idea that maybe doesn't jive with your stakeholders, you can end up in the danger zone pretty fast. And good ideas end up falling apart, unfortunately. I think we've seen that a lot with a lot of different concepts, theories, and education. They just end up being used in a way that doesn't align with the people you're trying to serve or the challenge you're trying to face. And that can create issues. Personally, when I was running an after school program, I ended up in the danger zone a couple of times. And sometimes it was pretty irritating, but I have to learn, right? One of the examples I give is we have, if any of you are familiar with the 21st century after school programming, get a lot of funds to support STEM work. And of course, we bought 3D printer. Awesome. I thought I nailed it. It was like self-cleaning, self-calibrating. I was like, here we go. I've done this before. I know what we want to do. We want to teach kids about STEM, want to, draw their attention to additive manufacturing, which is big here in Western PA. Great. Wonderful. We had 70 kids coming every day after school. I got 20 kids in the classroom. Everybody's making designs. Wonderful. Fire up the 3D printer. Oh, it's going to take 30 minutes to print one thing. Didn't understand my problem, folks. Right? We lost. The kids are frustrated. They got these designs. They were really excited. Well, it's hard when you tell them, it's going to take about 2 weeks everybody before we get all these printed. I didn't understand my problem, right? And I came up with this 3D printer design. So I try to learn from those mistakes, and that's a small one, maybe, but still, you try to know your problem well. So Sarah's going to talk about a really quick and I think a great toolbox method to have to help you identify some of the problems when you're working with any topic.
So I can say for certain that there are people here who have done a rose, thorn, bud before. And if you have not, it is a super easy method to engage with for all ages of all abilities. And it really gets to the heart of maybe where some of your issues might lay or challenges might be very, very quickly. So first, to explain, a rose, thorn, bud is essentially made up of 3 different colored stickies or Post-its, if you will. So the roses are going to be your positives, and they're typically denoted by a pink Post-it note. The blues are going to be your negatives, and those are going to be by a blue Post-it note. A thorn, if you will, is going to be a blue Post-it note. No worries. And then we have the buds, which are going to be greens. And so those are going to be where your potentials and your opportunities are going to lie. So the idea is that a group, a team all gets together and looks at, looks at the dog's awake, if anybody wanted to know, looks at a collective information that they've engaged with, an event, something that everybody has done and has seen and has witnessed together. And they go through and they're like, okay, well, what were the positives? What were the roses of this experience? What were the negatives? What were the thorns of this experience? Where might some potentials or suggestions lie that I might have? And so once you are done with all of those, giving all of that feedback, you then proceed to cluster them. And so we've seen this done with actually first graders, and it's amazing. So the idea is that these groups of kids were looking at their cafeteria experience, and it was not all that great. So first graders were giving feedback on their experience, and they were able to cluster and to kind of take a step back and look to see where the pain points were. So we've seen high schoolers do this. And this was a really great example. This was all about nuclear energy. So you can take a step back and you can look and see, well, where are the positives? Where are all my pinks? And then where are there some opportunities and where are there some negatives in terms of this topic? And so all different folks can engage with this. You could use this with your staff because they are looking at, maybe a curriculum redesign, or, hey, we're currently struggling with subs. Like, what's some ways that we could work around this, right? Like something to get folks quick feedback that is very balanced. And then from there, you can go through and, figure out which main theme you kind of want to focus on first. And as always, we got a video. I think I did this one too, didn't I? Is this one mine? Yeah. So this is me talking all about Rose, Thorn Bud. All right, I'm passing it back over to Aaron.
Yeah. And, as Sarah pointed out, after you use a Rose, Thorn, Bud and you identify those thorns, you got a big cluster of thorns, you can go back. And that's where interviewing comes in, right? That Debbie talked about. Go and talk to some folks who maybe are in that space, right? And learn more about that problem, define your problem well, right? So these methods, they fit together. They go in cycles and they fit together and they have a flow to them. But you'll slowly see that, right? So the next tidbit to take away is creating a safe space for brainstorming or ideation. You're all working in large systems and you're tackling complex problems. It's really, really valuable to be able to invite a lot of other folks into that process of problem solving. So you're not going through this all on your own or just with a small group, that other folks feel comfortable, especially those stakeholders who maybe are deeply invested in the problem you're tackling. They feel comfortable sharing ideas and solutions, right? So a couple ways to do that. Keep in mind, we often recommend setting parameters so that there's equitable participation in brainstorming sessions. And there's a lot of different ways you could do that. First one is setting some clear ground rules. Make sure everyone understands the problem they're tackling. Make sure that everyone understands why they're there, right? Why did you invite me to this space to share ideas? Many of the design methods that we use, we encourage brainstorming to start out as something that's silent. One of the things we see this with students and adults is that folks get nervous. They don't want people to judge their ideas. I do. I still get nervous, right? So having silent work can help. That way everyone who's participating can just focus on themselves. They're putting up their ideas, they're writing them on Post-it notes, putting them up. Nobody's vocalizing any judgment about any other ideas. Okay, that can help. Another one is setting time limits. Generating ideas, working together, problem solving. Sometimes it can be awkward. Sometimes people feel a little uncomfortable doing it. So it's helpful for them to know that they have it's going to be over. We're not going to do this for 3 hours, right? We're going to do this for 10 minutes at a time, maybe, right? And they'll be done. And on the flip side, setting time limits also creates some creative urgency, good urgency, but can push folks to do some rapid fire thinking too. So there's a positive to that as well. Push people. You can, we've done this with adults where you can kind of gamify. It's like, all right, we got 5 groups of staff working on something. Let's see who can come up with the most ideas. Let's go. You got 5 minutes. And you can churn out a lot of great ideas in a short time. And we mentioned this a little bit before, but use tools that allow for some anonymity. Again, so folks don't feel like they're being judged about their ideas, using things like Post-it notes, markers, online tools like Jamboard in Google or Whiteboard in Microsoft or Padlet, things where folks can post their ideas without anyone knowing who posted which idea. That really helps, can open up the world for brainstorming. And so one of the methods that we often recommend, it's a great one to get into if you haven't used very many structured brainstorming methods before. There are many of them. I love brainstorming. I think it's really fun, generating lots of ideas. Sky's the limit. One of the first ones we often recommend is round robin. It's a great one you can use with staff. Everyone's sitting at in seats, rotating, sharing ideas round and round, building on each other's ideas, using what we call rip, slap, pass, where everybody is passing a Post-it pad and adding their ideas to a pile, or doing what we call yes and, where you have to build off of someone else's idea. You can't shoot it down and say, no, I hate that, and scratch it out and do something different. Got to build together. helps build some cohesion with staff and students, things like that. So you can check that one out as well if you'd like. But there are many. Brainstorming is a whole world in design thinking. Tons of methods. Really fun too. And this piece, I feel like gets glossed over a lot in design thinking, and I'm on a mission to make sure it does not. Look for inspiration from people around you, from institutions around you, and build on others' ideas. Again, there's a lot of myth making around where good ideas come from and where success comes from, that it like just, we pull it out of the ether, right? And it's really not like that. It's okay to build on others. And a piece of the design process is, building a collection of inspiration for the work you're doing. In design, we call it an inspiration board or a mood board. Tack a bunch of stuff up so you can look at it and think about designs as you're creating your own. In education, I go when we're working on things in future readiness. I'm going and looking at other schools' websites. I'm downloading their 339 plans. I'm looking at their strategic plans. I want to see what other people are doing, right? And I keep those. I put them in a folder, and that's my inspiration board. But I don't want to start from scratch, and you don't have to start from scratch either. There are a lot of schools in Pennsylvania, and a lot of people are doing interesting things. It might be down the hall, it might be down the road, it might be a phone call away or Zoom, but people are doing interesting things. Don't feel like you have to start from scratch when you are problem solving. I used to do that. Sit in my room and try to, sit in my classroom and try to figure out all on my lonesome. No, there are so many ideas out there. So it's okay, but pause when you're trying to problem solve and stop and think, have we stopped and looked what other people are doing first? And you can build off it. I'm not saying copy and paste it, but build from it, right? Because not everyone's system is the same as yours either. Bear that in mind. But often there's good ideas out there you can pull into your system and adapt to your needs. All right, Sarah.
Erin was a lonely teacher. I'm sorry we didn't teach together. Okay, so as Erin said, right, like we've done all this brainstorming, but now what, right? We've got a gazillion different ideas, and we have to try and build some consensus around at least a couple of these, because there's no humanly way possible we can get all of these ideas done. And honestly, not all ideas are good either, right? They're just ideas. So it is important to try and place some structures in order to kind of come to a consensus on how you're going to move forward as a group. So one of those ways to do that is my most favorite method. It's called the importance effort matrix, and it is extremely structured to the point where like it gives Erin hives sometimes because it's very prescriptive. Now, Debbie, she loves it because, we're of the same mindset. But really your scenario is that you have all these ideas, and how are you going to try and narrow them down? Inevitably, no matter what team you work on, there is that one person who has the loudest voice that is going, we should do this, we should do this, we should do this. Well, that's not very equitable, right? The loudest person in the room doesn't mean that they're necessarily the most correct person in the room or the most thoughtful in terms of trying to get something accomplished. So as a team, to try and come to a consensus, you can use the method, the importance effort matrix. And really, it looks just like that. So you have all of these brainstormed ideas. You choose a handful of them, right? Depending on how many ideas you have, you choose a very small number. We typically say 10 to 12. And you rank these ideas based on how important or how much impact they're going to have on your system versus how difficult they are in terms of getting it done. And when we talk about like difficulty, it comes down to the do we need money? Do we have capacity? Do we capacity issues? Is it, time? Time's always a big thing in education. So we start to kind of go through and start to place these ideas in a different space within the matrix. And what it ends up doing is actually kind of giving us a little bit of a focus. So depending on which quadrant you land in determines basically how you are going to identify what these brainstorms are. So you've got your high ROI, which is going to be high return on investment. And then you're going to have luxury. You're going to have different strategic methods. And then you're going to have those that are like, these are the low hanging fruit, like our easiest wins. So those ones might not necessarily have a ton of importance. Thanks, Erin. Might not have a ton of importance or have a lot of impact, but they're going to get people on board. They're going to get our stakeholders on board right away. So what it looks like when it's done, not virtually, but like in person, this is what an importance matrix would look like. So we can actually, bye Janelle, thanks for stopping by. We can actually divide this entire matrix up into a couple of different groups, into thirds, and that's really your priorities, right? So priority group number 1, those are the things we're going to get done first. And then priority group number 2, those are the things we're going to work towards. And typically we want to be in the high ROI and the strategic quadrants of this matrix. So it creates a roadmap for your group, and everybody can get on board because the team itself has identified these ideas as being things that can actually get done. Now, it's not going to say it's not going to get done tomorrow, but it does create a roadmap for short-term and long-term planning purposes. One of my favorite, if Erin could talk about brainstorming all day, every day, I can do a matrix all the time. I find them extremely valuable and very helpful, and it works with my analytical mind. So again, it's highly structured. It requires clear decision-making and consensus in terms of like, how are we going to get this done? We all have to have a discussion because not everybody's going to want to rank a certain idea the same way all the time. So everybody on the team has to be on board, and it definitely establishes clear priorities that can translate into an action plan in the future. So again, as I said, it really does help with that planning of short-term and long-term goals. And of course, we have a video. It's a great one, if I don't say so myself. All right, so you are seeking out feedback. So when you seek feedback, this is where it becomes very important to get some ideas out there right away, right? And you want your stakeholders to kind of, engage with the solution that you have. The reason being is because we as humans really do get lost on the love time continuum. And that's what the love time continuum looks like. So the longer time I spend on a solution to a problem, the harder it's going to be for me to change that solution or modify that solution. This is where frequent feedback is really, really important. We have found that we as adults do this, amongst our teams, we do this, right? This is part of the reason why we honestly spend so much time shopping around ideas and working together collaboratively, because we all know that as humans, this is what we do. We have all witnessed our students doing this. A perfect example of that would be students making a PowerPoint that they're going to be presenting, and then they send it to you 2 days before, and you give them some feedback, and lo and behold, they haven't changed anything. So students do this as well. They don't want to get feedback either, and it is very hard, and it can be very. You can be kind of insecure in terms of getting feedback. So if you get feedback early and often, it helps to stop you from coming down the love time continuum, and you're able to modify your solution so that it is more human-centered in order to solve the problem for your stakeholders. So we wanted to give some examples because once you come up with a solution, you're gonna, as I said, in order to try and get some feedback, you're gonna want to kind of prototype it. And so we actually have a couple of concept posters, which are a form of prototyping an idea or a solution to a problem. So we've had districts that we've worked with in the past have prototype these solutions. They've come up with a concept poster that we were able to then give feedback on, that then they went and actually implemented within their system. So one of the teams that we've worked with, Brownsville Area School District, they actually had a whole space redesign. So they took their library, they changed it, using a small group of students and lots of HCD methods and a lot of different partnerships in order to make their library a future readiness center. And it was awesome because we actually got to see a rendering of what this space was going to look like. So it's just another example of how HCD methods can be applied to real world systems, educational systems, challenges that we all see. One of the other schools that we worked with was Riverview, and they actually did a curriculum redesign using HCD. So again, different types of methods going through, we're going to redesign our STEAM curriculum, and they were able to kind of identify where some sticking points were within their curriculum, and then try and, prototype it out. Let's just do one class. Let's not do it district wide. And they started slow to get some feedback early on and to make small tweaks to their curriculum. So then it could at one point then be sent out district wide. All right, I'm handing it over to Debbie as we're coming into the close.
Thanks, Sarah. So hopefully in our discussion of, this description of the different methods, you can see how they can be used with students. They can be used in department meetings. They can be used, in parent meetings. Your PTO could use the methods. If you're seeking input from the community on something, a big initiative in your district, you can use these methods to make sure you're talking to the right people. You have strategies to talk to them that help them feel valued and a part of the process, even if you don't take every one of their ideas, because they've been able to see that you made the effort to, one, listen to them, to acknowledge them, to incorporate as much of their thinking in the process and in the solution to where you're going. So Sarah, Aaron, and I have been developing a virtual training for educators to learn more about human-centered design methods and how to actually practice and apply the methods in their own context. Right now it is designed as a virtual training, but hopefully someday we will be in person again. I know most people are really excited to be in person. But the way it's structured right now is to meet as a cohort 4 times for 3-hour sessions. Those sessions will include synchronous and asynchronous time. And again, there's content that we share, and then there's practice and application. There's also a small amount of homework where they watch some additional videos of other methods that we have talked about but don't have time to cover in the actual live time. But that helps give them other ways to approach problems that they may be facing. And then we really do emphasize a lot of reflection in the homework time, because that's where, as adult learners, they're going to find like, oh, I can see how that works in this setting at my school, or I don't know a way to apply this at work yet, but I know a situation I have at home or in a community group that I work with, I'm going to apply it there. And the more and more that you practice, as we've discussed before, the more comfortable you are in seeing opportunities to use the methods in a variety of settings. In our general training, you can attend individually. So like I have one really rock star teacher that is excited about this, you send them, or you can come as a small team, or we can modify the training for a larger group from your district. So just keep those variations in mind depending on where you're at. We're always ready to design based on your needs as we try and be human-centered for you. The goals of this training are really to describe what design thinking is, what human-centered design is, and about the design cycle, to help folks develop the skills to use the methods, not only on their own, but how to link those methods together, right? We talked about how Rose Thorn Bud goes really well with affinity clustering. You can use stakeholder mapping with affinity clustering. How does what you find in your stakeholder map lead you to interviewing or some other method for empathizing, right? So how do you build those together to help you get to where you want to go? And then finally, the result of the training is that the folks who participate will have a plan for how they're going to apply the methods using, how to apply the methods to a problem that they have in their personal or professional lives, whether that's in their school, in your building, in your district, or in the community at large. So as you've heard us talk about lots of the videos that we do have a variety of methods recorded. These are explainer videos, so they are designed for you to watch individually and for you to have enough knowledge to then leave the video and do the method. It might not be perfect. You will have probably questions afterwards, but you will be equipped to go back. These are great ways to be like, oh, I heard them talk about Rose, Thorn, Bud, but I had a question about this. Okay, I'm going to watch the video and I'll get the tips and tricks again if you didn't catch them when we talked about them. These are also more robust than what we went over today in terms of how to do it, which tools to use, and which scenarios really work well for those kinds of methods. As Erin mentioned, we have additional resources in reading because we love this stuff. So when you get the slide deck, you will have active links to these 3 resources, which we find are the most beneficial for learning more about design thinking and human-centered design. And we are always happy to talk about these things, so feel free to email us at any time. Most of you know us from various things, but we are still here, active and working, and happy to talk with you about any particular situation you have, whether that's you would like a training or you'd like us to facilitate something. Those are all options and things that we offer from the consortium to help you better serve your students and your communities. And all of the videos that we have are on our website. And when we share new ones, they are on our social media channels. So feel free to check those out. That's all we have. But if you have questions, we have 4 minutes left to hear your questions. We always like to get you out on time. But feel free to add any questions you have to the chat and we will be happy to take those.
If you ever want to talk about design thinking in more detail, we'd be happy to do that anytime.
Yes.
Thanks for coming today, everybody.
Yes, if you have to go, we totally understand. Thank you for being here. We hope to see you again soon.